and with responsibility for planning to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's nice to see a number of people that we can talk to out there, and I hope they can understand what it is we're now going to go through. We've organised a very helpful presentation from the two people to my right to help put over the salient points. I'll just put a little bit of the background forward before we move into this presentation. There does seem to be a great deal of confusion about what is going on here, and I hope this evening will resolve that confusion, and we'll all go away understanding what it is that we're doing here. The government requires us, as a local planning authority, to produce and maintain a plan to detail the policies that will be used to control development in this district over the next 5 years. There is a very strict protocol that must be followed to the letter. For consistency across the country, they must have determined the rules, standards and methods which must be used in the creation of this plan. The importance and the vital function is to ensure that fairness prevails here, and also eliminates the possibility of corruption and favouritism. So what we're talking about is a set of rules that the government have put down, and I'm not blaming the government or using the government or anything else. They set the standards by which we have to work. If we don't work to those standards, then the devil help us, I have to say on this one, because the planning inspector will find out, and the whole thing will get washed away. This plan is fundamental to our development control process. Failure to comply has very serious repercussions. Now people say, no, we don't want this plan, we don't want that plan, but hasten, take heart, because paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, which we as planners all follow, says where there is no plan or the relevant sections of the plan are out of date, the LPA must give consent to any application unless they can demonstrate solid planning reasons for not so doing. So without this plan, it's a free-for-all, a virtual planning free-for-all that will prevail here. So the plan is extremely important to us. I hope you can understand why we've devoted so much time and effort into producing this very large plan. I can only thank very much the officers who put in endless hours over the last couple of years, or even more, but certainly over the last couple of years I'm aware of, in producing this plan, analysing and consulting. You will note that the first 185 pages of this document, it relates to the local plan, relates to the new policies to be used to guide and control development. It covers a number of aspects from spatial strategy through to historic and built environment. It is a very, very comprehensive document. But again, the government requirement is for the plan to be reviewed and updated at least every 5 years. Our previous plan, the core strategy, was issued in 2013, so it is now time for us to do a complete review. We have done other reviews partway through in 2017. We did the Phillipsville Action Plan and the site issues, but this one has to be a complete review of our local plan. So that's the planning part, by the way, because I'm not sure too many people realise there is a planning part. What they're interested in very much is the sites at the back. Because in addition to these policies, the government requires us to produce a plan showing how many dwellings and how much employment land will be required in this district for the period up to 2036. The remaining 126 pages of this document cover that requirement. The government have issued standard methodologies to be followed for calculating the number of dwellings needed based on the median house prices and the median earnings in the area. For Suffolk Coastal, we are required to deliver at least 10,476 houses, which equates until 2036, I have to add, not next week, but until 2036, which equates to 582 homes per year. Taking into account the planning permissions that are already in the pipeline, this equates actually to 3,478 over the period. In addition, we are required to provide land for employment uses, and our strategy is for the provision of employment land up to 6,500 acres, or hectares. So jobs, I'm terribly sorry, up to 6,500 jobs. I do apologise, because it suddenly struck me as being a very large area. The procedure that we must follow, again, is prescribed by the government. It's called the call for sites. And we have to ask around, has anybody got a site that might well be, you're prepared to give up for building in the future? And there's a call for sites. And we did that, first of all, in 2016. We've done it subsequently, and they have come through subsequent to that. So we have got these sites coming forward from the call for sites. They were rigorously tested against the stipulated requirements to produce the spatial strategy. Throughout, the major emphasis has been on consultation with the public and with other bodies. Details of that will be given in the presentation that comes up to show that these are not hollow words. We have tried our damnedest to get everybody involved in these plans over the past couple of years. And as I say, details are coming up later. All the comments received have been properly considered against the criteria, and where appropriate, the changes have been made as a result of the consultation. The next steps, if we have our plan adopted this evening, it's essential that we ensure that the plans put forward to the planning inspector are judged to be sound. And by sound, I mean meeting all their requirements, as the government will be checked to say that are we sound. Representations on soundness and legal compliance for the final draft plan, which will hopefully come out from this evening, can be made between the 14th of January and the 25th of February. Following this, the council will submit the plan to the Secretary of State. So this isn't the end of the whole business. This is a job for this council to say that we are happy that what we're going to put forward to the Secretary of State is sound. It meets their requirements. After that, there's 6 weeks in which the public can come, and there'll be drop-in sessions, there will be public meetings. If there is the case that you can prove that we have bypassed, not interpreted the rules properly, in other words, the thing is not sound, then that's the opportunity to come forward. I'll cut short there, so I put you on right. But I will hand over to the experts on this here, who've worked so solidly to get this thing together. Mark and Andrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 questions to ask, and maybe a 4th, depending on the answers I have to the first 3. So, will you indulge me to ask those questions now?
Yes.
Thank you. So, the first question, excluding corporate responses and members of the public's responses that were clearly wrongly attributed to supporting the development of the proposed North Pimlico Garden neighbourhood, how many responses actually supported the scheme? And ditto, the Innocents Lane project. So, of the 920 responses that were shown that were received with the Innocents Lane, how many of those were actually in support of that scheme? That's the first 2 questions.
Yes. If I could take the question by question, because that obviously is a detailed question, I again would have to look to the people who, on my right, who have these sorts of figures together. I hope they have these figures together. Yes, they're looking.
The consultation statement, which I touched on in the presentation, which is Appendix C within the report and was available electronically. Within that, all the policies that we received and all the site allocations, the total numbers are given. Within just reading through the Innocents Farm one, which is one I found first, the total comments 332, of which 7 of them were in support, 314 objected, 11 were identified as observations, and we, as I touched on earlier, we also received a petition signed by over 900 persons. The next one was about North Felixstowe.
North Felixstowe Garden.
Let me just flick to that one. I would just point out that all of these responses are available on our website for for people to view as well. In terms of the North Felixstowe Garden neighbourhood, the total number of comments was 211, of which 19 were in support, objection 166, and observations was 26.
So my next question is then, why do you bother with consultations when you simply ignore the policy?
Yes, I'm willing to come back on that particular one because the responses are analysed against the criteria that we have to analyse it against, and the conclusion is quite rightly what the officers have come up with. We don't do planning on the number of people who write letters in and complain about things. That is not the basis under which anywhere, I'm terribly sorry, I know this is not the thing that the audience want to hear, but that is never the way that a planning system can work. We cannot have, shall we say, planning consent granted by the number of people who want it, or in other ways denied because of the number of people who don't want it. It follows planning rules and guidance, and that's what we're setting up here.
Yeah, thank you. So, in other words, you're really much taking the box exercise. Right, sorry.
Councillor Price just wanted to respond to Councillor Deacon's off-the-cuff comment there, I think.
I really must take exception to the comment to say that it's tick the box exercise. Throughout this whole game, throughout this whole programme, we have absolutely insisted on their proper consultation. The people come in, they'll put their comments in, they'll put their comments through the website, they'll come to the sites, they'll come to our drop-in sessions, and they'll put their views. And as I said in my planning authority, and that's what we've done. And if you can find anywhere in this what we've done, an exception to that where we have not abided by the rules of the government, then I'd be pleased to know, and that's what this is all about. But in this particular case, there might well have been 1 million people coming and saying we don't like it. But what are the reasons, and how do they stack up against the government's policies?
Thank you. The final one is, I wonder, could we return to the slide that had the Golden neighbourhoods of Northern Felixstowe, sort of a little map of, is that possible? Please? Thank you very much. The first thing, you refer to the Grove woodland. Does that description also extend into the Abbey Grove woodland, which is an addition to the historic grove?
I hope my colleagues on the line.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Harding, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman, there are a great number of residents here from Felixstowe this evening, all of whom are querying the allocation of the number of houses that we are to have in Felixstowe according to the local plan. I wondered if the officers can explain how that number has been arrived at. I know that we have sat through numerous presentations on the SHMAR and various other things, but to make it more easily understandable for the people who are so concerned here tonight, if we could have a simple, if possible, explanation as to how that figure has been arrived at.
Thank you. Councillor Fire?
I'll try and do simple. Of course, the strategy for Felixstowe is a key part of the overall strategy in the local plan. If members remember, during the issues and options consultation, we presented a variety of distributions and options, and through the public consultation responses and the work of the local plan working group, that evolved to a strategy and a distribution, which was in our first draft local plan. The strategy and the level of housing directed towards Felixstowe provides the opportunity to integrate the Candlewood Road appeal site, which, as we've touched on, as already has outline plan permission. It also provides the opportunity to deliver a sustainable community for Felixstowe and allow the council to achieve the leisure vision that it sets out to do. So by allowing, by having a larger, more comprehensive scale of development, the infrastructure that's needed and was identified through the consultation responses can be delivered on a much more comprehensive approach, following the principles of the Garden Cities.
Thank you. I'm not sure that was the sort of answer I was seeking. It was a more comprehensive why we have to provide the number of houses that we do over the period of the plan, based on what, really? Sorry.
So, Chairman, if I may just try to clarify what it is that Councillor Savage is seeking. Are you looking for a clearer explanation as to where the 10,000 odd figure, the government methodology, came from? Well,
Yes, I am.
Suffolk Coastal. Right. So, do officers understand what the Councillor Savage is coming from? Yes. I'll leave it to you then.
Yes, hopefully I can answer fairly concisely. The housing figure of 582 dwellings per year, or 10,500 over the plan period, is based on what's referred to as the standard methodology, which is set out in national policy. The national policy was revised earlier this year to introduce this national standard method, and the housing number is based upon a calculation that's set out in that national policy, which is the latest household projections with an uplift that takes into account the latest published ratio of affordability of earnings to house prices. And those statistics are statistics that are published at the national level. They're published by the Office for National Statistics, but for each local authority level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fright answered the question about why we allocated, in effect, the Felixstowe North Garden suburb. Would he agree that quite apart from the thinking, as we have to, about the government numbers, not any of us wishing to be dictated to by government against our better judgment, we also thought long and hard about how best Felixstowe can progress in terms of supporting the economy of the port, supporting our thriving resort economy, supporting our tourist economy and our retail economy, and that all of those also indicated that Felixstowe has for a century been a rapidly growing town, and that for that to continue is quite apart from government figures. We all, I think, understood, having thought about it at some length, that that was equally a co-equal reason for the allocation. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I will agree with what you're talking on, and thank you very much for putting those things forward. The point about it also that we need to consider when we're looking at these sites is we're talking about a considerable amount of investment in infrastructure and facilities for the people. These don't come when you're building 2 or 3 houses. It has to be a quantum of houses that will justify a school and all the other facilities that we're talking about providing here. It's not done in isolation, it isn't. But I do take on board exactly what Councillor Smith is saying. There's always been a rapid development in Felixstowe. It's not necessarily the case that drives us at the moment, but nevertheless, we have to recognise that.
Councillor Kerry.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. The 2 parish councils I represent have sort of great concerns over the Innocents Lane site. So Doreen asked a question about how they arrived at the number of homes in Felixstowe. So I would ask how you arrived at the acreage or hectares for the Innocents Lane site, please.
The main drive behind the Innocents Farm allocation is the document referred to in the presentation from consultants on the Felixstowe Port and Development Needs Study, and that is a comprehensive document which looks specifically at the port and the port-related sectors. Our earlier employment evidence identifies that the port and the associated businesses that feed off the port are very important to our local economy and also the national economy. The study that we commissioned and undertaken, was engaged the port, engaged some of the services and some of the businesses which operate within our district, and identified a sort of I think the terminology is a high, medium, and a low forecast. The allocation, as I touched on in the presentation, seeks to deliver the land or provide the land to meet the sort of central mid forecast and a comprehensive development over the plan period.
Thank you. Councillor Block.
Thank you, Chairman. A question on neighbourhood plans, if I may, and their relationship to this new document. It is stated in the neighbourhood plan section that those plans must obviously be mindful of and be aware of the local plan. Where neighbourhood plans have already been made and approved, and there is now a conflict between the neighbourhood plan proposal and the local plan proposal, are you expecting neighbourhood plans to be revised, or if not revised, how will the conflict be acted in terms of planning decisions?
Well, the answer to your question really is yes. Because when we first introduced neighbourhood plans years ago, we actually said that they must be consistent with the plan, the local plan of the local planning authority, and they were, and they produced them. But I have to accept that as far as local neighbourhood plans are concerned, and I've been involved with several, they are a very, very time-consuming and hard-working job to do. So I can understand that there's a reluctance to change it, but the reality of life is, and the government instructions coming down with the NPPF also, say that we need to look into the neighbourhood plans to talk about housing numbers and remove those, but also that the neighbourhood plans have to be consistent with the local plans of the local council. Now, I know that's not a very nice answer, or not a very good answer, but that is the actual fact. The neighbourhood plans are not in date if they don't line up with our plans, which we've got until the end of this year now to line up. But by that time, they have to line up with our local plan.
So in the case of Marcham, will that require a revision of the Marcham?
Obviously, the modifications that Marcham want to do with their neighbourhood plan, it is up to them. But the thing is, if it affects the vision, if it affects the housing numbers as such, yes, we would expect those to be included in it.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Despite the Chief Executive's advice to the Contract Committee meeting, I would just like to make it clear that I am also a member of Felixstowe Council, who are obviously very concerned by all these issues, involved in all these issues. And it's proper, I think, that people understand that when one speaks here, one speaks with one of the inputs as being that membership. But when I'm here, I have my views here. When I'm in Felixstowe, I have them there. With that preface, a question for Mr. Ridley. And I've got the plan open at page 202, paragraph 12.48, which is part of the narrative for the North Felixstowe Garden neighbourhood. And I've also got a plan 2 pages on the policy. I'm looking at the last sentence at the bottom of that page, 12.48, and it says, and the topic we're concerned with is access to the site, and more importantly, I and the vast majority of my colleagues locally are concerned about the accesses across and within the site. So there's a phrase there which is not actually precisely replicated in the policy that says opportunities to create a network of vehicular and non-vehicular pedestrian cycling links throughout the garden neighbourhood are to be explored to provide interconnectivity and free movement through the site and beyond. Would Mr. Ridley affirm, and I think he has an impression he has given us in other contexts, that would allow the consideration at least of a spine road through the site, so that the whole of that area can work together as a community in the way, as I've said in a moment to certain people today, Chester Stadium, Felixstowe, Cavendish Park and Felixstowe work as a community because they're linked together. That paragraph, I think we may take as assurance that that topic can at least be considered as the master plan moves forward.
Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public. My name is Philip Ridley. I'm the Head of Planning and Coastal Management for the two East Suffolk Councils. To answer Councillor Smith's question, the short answer is yes, that it could be considered as part of that. But for members' information, this was considered at the scrutiny meeting back in November, where the scrutiny committee had the issue raised in relation to the delivery of a potential spine road through the site. An officer's view is that a span road is likely to be unacceptable given the constraints of the growth woodland and the open space provision, which was talked about in earlier questions. And there was a vote taken on at that meeting where the scrutiny committee determined that a span road was not an appropriate route. But I can confirm that in terms of Councillor Smith's question, it hasn't been discounted. It's just reflecting the environmental constraints, and the master plan and the policy does not preclude that.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Councillor Dunno.
I think perhaps I want to make some clarification as the chairman of the scrutiny committee. I don't think we actually, my committee never agreed that the spine road should not be considered out of hand. The committee felt that it was not for them to make that decision, and that any spine road could be in or out of the plan, and that was down to when the final plans come in for that area.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Then I shall invite Councillor Fryer to move recommendations on page 12 of the paper. As amended.
Yes. Right. I'm going to read it out in full, but I must admit there's a lot of it. Number one, that the Council approves the final draft local plan with the amendment that we've taken earlier for publication under Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning Local Planning Regulation 2012 as amended to receive representations in relation to soundness. That the Head of Planning and the Coastal Management, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Planning, be given delegated authority to make any typographical or presentational stroke format changes necessary linked to the publication of the final draft local plan. 3. That the Head of Planning and Coastal Management, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Planning, be given delegated authority following the 6-week period to receive representations relating to soundness, to submit the local plan for examination by the Planning Inspectorate. 4. That the Head of Planning and Coastal Management, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Planning, be given delegated authority during the examination into the local plan to address minor modifications that may arise as part of the examination. I so move.
Councillor Holcroft.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second that motion and reserve the right to speak later. Thank you.
I'm now inviting the Council to debate. Councillor Londa, would you like to continue?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I apologise for my error earlier. What I opened on was I would like to move that an amendment is made to policy SCLP 1225, where the first part A, proscribes the type of development that has to be built there. In no other case, in 2 years that I was working on all this, did that situation arise where proscription. What makes this particularly unpleasant is because it was introduced as a late amendment into the plan. It only came in right at the very end. So there was no time for the parish to actually develop it or work on it until after the first consultation had taken place. Then we saw this line appear. Now, Martlesham spent a long time developing a neighbourhood plan. It was delayed again and again because of a number of factors, particularly including the Brightwell Lake situation and the fact that Martlesham is not allowed to use its parish boundaries and various other things. But nevertheless, they did produce a plan, a good plan that was made and been accepted, and the plans are supposed to sit alongside the current core strategy. The current core strategy, shall we say, together with the plan, work quite well, except when a new plan comes along and the wording is rewritten. This is not very helpful. So at the moment we have a conflict. On the one hand, the new document is proscribing the type of residences to be flats and smaller dwellings, whereas the local plan says that it should be a mix of housing development. And I see no reason why that should be changed. So I am proposing, Madam Chairman, that we amend the first part of that policy, which is SCLP 1225 on page 258, and I recommend that the wording on part A is changed from delivery, I'm quoting now, delivery of a contemporary high quality residential scheme incorporating flats and a mix of residences to meet local needs. And I am proposing that that change be incorporated and the other wording is removed.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, before Councillor Blundell sits down, can we just clarify the exact wording? Sorry, if we could just brought back on line. Well, give it a go. This is the top part there, Councillor Blundell?
No.
This is the bottom part?
No, the bottom part.
Right, okay.
Councillor Friars.
Yes, if I could come on that particular one. I have to bring back Councillor Blundell to the fact of why we're sitting here, and what we're doing, in effect, is not looking at particular cases in question. We're saying, is it a sound decision? Now, if you can demonstrate to us that the decision is not sound, then I'm quite prepared to take it on board. But at the moment, there is no evidence to suggest that that decision was arrived in any other way than by a proper sound process.
I'm not completely happy with that answer because this was not brought in and discussed in depth at the actual working party. This issue was not there because it came in far too late.
Okay.
So, just to finish off that, Chair. So, in effect, you are beginning to pinpoint the reasons why you're saying this is not a sound decision and therefore you want it changed.
A modification.
Yeah.
It's only a small modification.
Okay. So, really, Madam Chair, if I may. So, Councillor Blundell has proposed an amendment, and the way to build that amendment into the resolution is to change resolution number 1, recommendation number 1 on your page, members. That bear in mind, this has already been amended once by Councillor Bond, but we would then need to include the wording so that it would read that the Council approves the final draft local plan subject to the deletion or omission of the word contemporary for paragraphs 12.339, page 287, and 12.350, page 289, and amend policy 12.25 to read delivery of high quality residential schemes incorporating flats and a mix of residential residences to meet local needs.
Point of order. Can we, the Chief Exec, please read at the speed we can write?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the amendment then, which the key words which you need to include are as follows: and amend policy 12.25, page 258, to read a bracket delivery of high quality residential scheme incorporating flats and a mix of residences to meet local needs. And then the remainder of the resolution, the recommendation would be as is written, which would be, and I'll read this out, it's already in your papers, of the final draft local plan for publication under Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning Local Plan Regulations 2012 as amended. They've already got that in your papers, members. So, Councillor Blundell, have I got that right? That's your amendment that you're suggesting there?
Thank you. Yes.
No, that's fine. So we're not there yet. You need a seconder for that amendment. Do we have a seconder for that amendment?
Councillor Harvey.
Two. Right. Okay. Right. So, we're now going, Madam Chairman, through you, Madam Chairman, because we've had an amendment from Councillor Blondell and it's been seconded by Councillor Harvey, the amendment councillors have the opportunity to debate that amendment.
Would councillors wish to debate this? Councillor Savage.
Thank you. Yes. I want to be clear on this because I thought when Councillor Blundell stood up, he was objecting to the wording incorporating flats, stating that there were already a number of flats in the area. Are you leaving that in?
Councillor Blundell.
Yes, Madam Chairman, there are already a number, we cannot say that they cannot build flats. And if they wish to incorporate some flats in the development, then that is up to the development and the council to decide. But
Thank you.
it should not be prescribed solely as flats and smaller dwellings.
Councillor Bird. Councillor Friars first, sorry.
No, it was just the fact that I know that we could have Philip Ridley come in on a number of technical points on this one, which might help the debate.
I'll try and be brief, members, in terms of the derivation of the policy that Councillor Blundell's proposed his amendment on. And if I can take members, if they have it before them, to page 256 of the plan that's accompanying the report, and that sets out how the policy has been arrived at. And in policy 12.227, and this is obviously members need to be aware that this site is an opportunity that's come forward during the delivery of the plan. It originally wasn't put forward for a site, and then it is back in. And to not have a positive policy to address the site would cause problems if an application were to subsequently come forward without those parameters in place. And in paragraph 12.227, it talks about the Marsham Neighbourhood Plan in July 2008, and policy MAR5 of the Marsham Neighbourhood Plan identifies the need for bungalows, flats and sheltered accommodation in Martlesham Heath. So the derivation of this policy has been trying to achieve the aims and ambitions of the Martlesham Neighbourhood Plan. And moving further on in paragraph 12.228, it's talking about the Martlesham Neighbourhood Plan identifies the need for additional sports provision in the village, and therefore expected provision of sports facilities to be used by the community will be as part of the proposals. And then in 12.230, it talks about the delivery of allotments and community gardens. So taking those three key components of the Martlesham Neighbourhood Plan, arrived at the policy that Councillor Blundell's proposed amendment of, policy 12.225, and the Council's interpretation, presented by Councillor Friar. Councillor Blundell said this has been provided by officers, and that is not the case. This has been derived through the local plan working group, and for Councillor Friar to present through Cabinet and Council tonight, has come forward to deliver a viable proposal which would need to achieve in the order of approximately 300 dwellings. To achieve the retention of the sports facilities for community use, the allotments, you do need to have a higher density development. I'm quite content in terms of the delivery of a proposal to have the word contemporary removed, but the text ahead before the policy talks about the Marsham hamlets and the different design ethos that's explained, especially on Marsham Heath itself. But I think in order to achieve the desires of what the neighbourhood plan is wanting to achieve, it does require higher density to get the platted developments, the bungalows, the sheltered accommodation to meet those needs of the population. So that's the advice in terms of the background to how the policy was arrived at, and I hope that provides some guidance as to how you may wish to proceed with the proposition.
I'll allow Councillor Blundell to comment.
I have not asked for the removal of the words high density. I've allowed that, I've agreed with that and said it. It's just the fact that it's prescribed for smaller dwellings only, and that may object.
Give me then, Councillor, I'm not Mr. Misread, yes, but so, okay. All right. We'll put high density, you're happy to include high density in here.
Yeah, Councillor Byrne.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It seems we're getting bogged down with semantics here. It just seems to me that the support for Councillor Blundell's, it seems to me, reasonable amendment is the same rationale quite well articulated by Councillor Bond in support of his amendment, which the head of planning was willing to accept. By taking out prescriptive wording doesn't preclude that being the type of development that's arrived at in eventuality. Indeed, actually, you could argue by being less prescriptive in the policy would help facilitate development to a greater degree. So by taking this prescriptive description of smaller dwellings out doesn't preclude any eventual development that transpires from having small dwellings. I believe that was the same point well made by Councillor Bond, that to take contemporary out as a prescriptive description in the policy doesn't prevent a contemporary design coming forward, nor does it in this case prevent a larger quantity of smaller dwellings being in the eventual plan. As I understand it, Councillor Blundell's rationale and argument is that such prescriptive language isn't used in other policies within the document. What is the rationale for this policy being singled out for such prescriptive description? As I say, it seems to me perfectly reasonable. We're not going to be altering the sentiment or content of the policy by this minor amendment, and it seems perfectly reasonable just to take it out as prescriptive, not preventing such a development coming forward in the eventuality. And it just seems to me if the head of planning or planning cabinet member were prepared to accept this amendment as he did the previous one, we could then move on.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Delvin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I take a completely opposing view to that from Councillor Byrne. I think that the removal of the word contemporary is perfectly legitimate, should Councillor Blundell have asked for that. But the issue here is, as explained by the head of planning there, what we're asking for within this site is high quality, high density residential schemes incorporating, not solely, but incorporating flats and smaller dwellings. And the incorporation of those flats and smaller dwellings in there allows the correct mix of delivery on that particular site. If we take those words out there, then we have delivery of contemporary, high quality, high density dwellings. Now, that in itself means that if a plan comes forward that is high density, but is 4 and 5 bedroom houses, then that's perfectly acceptable, and we would struggle as a planning authority to knock that back. The inclusion of those words in there mean that you will get high density residential scheme incorporated, i.e. including flats and smaller dwellings. You can still have some larger dwellings in that, but it will be incorporating the flats and smaller dwellings.
Chairman, if I may, I appreciate Councillor Kelso is waiting, but if I may, just to clarify, so I've got Councillor Blundell's words here, and if I can refer you all to page 258, so you can follow this, fingers at the ready. If you look at the top of page 258, and little a, it currently says delivery of a contemporary, high quality, high density residential scheme incorporating flats and smaller dwellings. Councillor Blundell has just rightly pointed out he wanted to include high density in the words he's written here. So it should read delivery of high quality, high density residential scheme incorporating flats and a mix of residences to meet local needs. That is Councillor Blundell's suggested change, which I think strikes me that you all seem to be raging agreement with. Councillor Kelso might be different.
Councillor Kelso. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, good idea. Sorry.
Councillor Kelso.
Yes, sorry, if I can come in on that. Yes, I would accept exactly what you're saying there as being perfectly acceptable, because I don't really see a fundamental change to what we're talking about. What we have worked on, as we heard from Mr. Ridley, is the fact that they have worked very closely with the Martlesham neighbourhood plan to have a look at the sort of things that Martlesham might want on that side. So I'm quite happy to take on board the change that you're making.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I ask the officers to actually dig out Mile 5 and remind everybody what Mile 5 says? Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't remember high density being mentioned. And the problem we have here is that when the neighbourhood plan was drawn up, it was drawn up on the basis that Martlesham would not have any large-scale development. We were talking about very small-scale developments, possibly 20 houses being provided between Old Martlesham and Martlesham Heath. All of a sudden, we're now talking about 300. So it's not like for like, I'm afraid. So could we have clarification on exactly what Mile 5 says? Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Councillor Blundell.
I have Mile 5 here, and I'd be happy to read it out for the benefit of the members. Thank you. Martlesham, as you said, now this is a few words, so I ask for your patience and understanding. This is policy Mile 5 on residential mix. Residential developments should provide a mix of dwelling sizes and tenures, both market and affordable housing, that meet the requirements of Suffolk Coastal Core Strategic Policy SP3. In particular, this should provide 2 and 3 bedroom properties to meet the needs of older people looking to downsize and local people looking to remain in the area. In Part B, it says this housing mix should also seek to provide the significant majority of the 2 and 3 bed properties to address the following needs: 1, 2 bed bungalows; 2, 3 bed bungalows; 3, 2 bed flats; and 4, sheltered accommodation. The one thing that is missing in the Martlesham area is any form of, shall we say, retirement home or sheltered accommodation that is, shall we say, separate to commercial items.
We have an amendment, Chairman. We haven't seconded. Councillor Bryant has already said he's have intent, but I think perhaps it's appropriate to invite members of the council that they're happy to adopt that amendment that's suggested.
There's a vote, Madam.
Yeah.
Should we have a vote on this then, please?
Do you accept the amendment? All
in favour?
Right, well, I think that's carried. Any against?
Any against?
Any
Any
abstentions?
abstentions?
No, right. Oh, Councillor abstained, sorry, Councillor Smith. Okay, right. So, Madam Chairman, we're back into the debate.
Any more speakers? Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been on the working group of the Suffolk Coastal Local Plan since its inception. A tremendous amount of hard work has been undertaken on this large document. I would like to thank all the officers for their part in this. A lot of midnight oil has been burnt. It has been a massive task undertaken in a very tight time schedule. We looked at the total Suffolk coastal area when working on allocation sites for both housing and employment land based on researched housing numbers and carefully calculated employment figures. There has not been any substantial house building for many years, and young people have been unable to find somewhere to live, whether that be for first-time buyers or those who wish to rent. The plan has attempted to solve these problems, and in most ways it is an excellent plan. A huge number of public consultation responses have been read and worked on. Now it comes to the crucial point where it has to be voted on by the full council at this meeting tonight to continue its journey towards a decision from the inspectors later this year, after yet another 6 weeks of consultation on soundness, starting on the 14th of January. As many of you will know, I represent Curtain Ward, which is adjacent to Innocent's site SCLP 12.35 for 67 hectares of farmland for warehousing, container storage and port-related activity. This is one of the largest sites in the plan and is basically the elephant in the room as far as my ward is concerned. We appreciate the need to support the Port of Felixstowe, and indeed many of our local people work in dependent port-related businesses. But the impact on our area, should this go ahead, should not be underestimated. The Lichfield report on 2008 suggested more suitable sites for port-related development areas. In 2018, the Lichfield report had changed its direction and concentrated far more on Innocent's Farm as the ideal site. Indeed, some sites have the same points as Innocent's Farm that have now been disregarded. The area of this site for employment use has shrunk as a result of the responses and now extends from the western boundary of the site, with a clear indication in the policy that access and egress in both directions onto the A14 is essential. Also designed not to allow traffic through our narrow village lanes. However, traffic is only one consideration of the development of this site. Air pollution, noise, light pollution are of major concerns, particularly as there is now another piece of land involved on the south side of the A14 adjacent to the AONB, stretching down to the River Orwell. Some things cannot be changed or mitigated, but the fact that our prevailing wind is from the southwest cannot be changed. Any pollution from this site, whether it is diesel fumes, known to be a contributory factor to Alzheimer's, or noise levels, will be blown over our area, thereby affecting those houses neighbouring the site and also Curtain Village. Trelew St Martin Primary School is only yards from this site too, with 210 children and 30 or so staff and support workers. In correspondence with Suffolk County Council, I have been told this school will not be closed, but moved. I ask, what is the difference when they are suggesting it is moved over half a mile away so that our village children in Curtain will not be able to walk to it? Another 2,000 houses are planned for the Felixstowe Garden Village. Some of these sites border on the AONB towards the River Devon. The infrastructure, particularly the A14, will struggle to take this extra traffic. Suffolk County Highways and Highways England have failed to take on board the need for a satisfactory route for traffic for the frequent closures of the Orwell Bridge, either for high winds or accidents. Routes around Ipswich are frequently stationary when the bridge is closed, but that is for another discussion. I will finish by saying that I am not totally reassured that there is the need for all this housing and employment development on already overstretched roads on our precious peninsula, bordered by two lovely rivers and large areas of outstanding natural beauty. I do not look favourably at the joining up of the industrial areas between Ipswich and Felixstowe. Not a particularly good approach for Felixstowe, our up-and-coming town. I shall therefore not be supporting this plan in its present form. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. May I put on record the hard work of the officers in presenting the report, which I think is very interesting and obviously represents a lot of hard work both by officers and members. But you know what, Madam Chairman, this evening? I'm a doubting Thomas as well. And why? I'm very concerned about these garden neighbourhoods, so-called. And I particularly draw your attention, Madam Chairman, this evening to the whole question of the Saxmundham garden development. Why, oh why, Madam Chairman, is there such a blind obsession with the garden neighbourhood, particularly when we look at Saxmundham? I've read very, very carefully, and I can tell you what happened in Framlingham, of course, and there is a link. The first victim of these developments is affordable housing. And we saw what happened, and my learned colleague, Councillor Gow, when we went on File on 4, talked about the whole thing on Radio 4 as to what happens to affordable homes. The developers strike them out. The other thing that comes to mind, let's say that you're going to double the size of a place like Felixstowe to 25 to 50,000 people. If that is the case and you put 10,000 new homes in, the basic question is where they're going to work. With artificial intelligence and everything else, it is a concern, Madam Chairman, that we need to be aware of, and that guesstimates on numbers need to go to the whole spectrum of what it means to make a garden development that's sustainable and viable. So I ask again, why this fatal attraction to the whole idea of this garden village in this location? My understanding, looking through the Leave the Layers Alone document, was that the people of Saxmundham, for example, very much, and it's a report from Bailey Venning, and it was very readable, very well argued, and made a lot of sense to me, Madam Chairman. The allegation is that no viability testing of the garden development had been done. There had not really been a viability study about the costly roundabouts that may come in. Now, I noticed that the definition has changed from the first iteration to make it into a multi-use or multi-plan, multidisciplinary area. But is the door closed on more housing development in Saxmundham? I don't believe it is, Madam Chairman. That's why I'm a doubting Thomas, and I obviously seek your guidance on this, and I seek guidance of colleagues, because affordable homes will be a victim. It's a top-down format. Does the new development rule out having more homes that will be forced in areas that are not really wanted? And I notice my colleague, Councillor Dunnett, is the chairman of Saxmundham. He's also the chairman of Scrutiny, and also a member of this council. And it can't be easy to try and serve all these various different interests simultaneously. Why are we still pressing on with this garden development in an area that is not popular with so many people? I guess the arguments could apply to whichever areas that we look at throughout our district. Saxmundham people, as I say, favour a different area. Can we deliver it? Well, I believe that we can't deliver it. Cui bono, I ask, whose good is this accruing to? Developers? Well, certainly. Certainly, developers. Why do we need so many homes? Well, there are many reasons, perhaps. But one of them, of course, is that we think we can build our way out of a recession. Yes. I think we're going to build our way into one. Yes. It's as simple as that. There's one other point that I'd like to bring to you. There are several points, but I'll be as short as I can. One of the most important things for us to be here when we're sitting in a quasi-judicial position is that we have to use Lord Nolan's principles: transparency, openness, and integrity. Principles and integrity lie at the heart of our work. Now, I know that Councillor Dunnett has been honest enough to declare that he's a Freemason in Adair Lodge 936. And I'm here to tell you, of course, that these are not a comment, these are staged questions of fact, Madam Chair.
What is wrong with that? I have declared it.
You have declared it, and also the leader of the council has declared it. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Why bring it up?
Because it's a fact.
I could well be a member of Old Club.
Please sit down and...
Madam Chairman, may I say, they are both members of a seat...
I've asked you to sit down.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did declare an interest as a member of Felixstowe Town Council, and I think it's important that members the public appreciate that I am a member of Felixstowe Town Council, and I'm afraid what I'm about to say is very parochial, but nevertheless I think it needs to be said. I do appreciate the need for a housing development in Felixstowe area, especially that of truly affordable homes. That is, homes that our young people can afford to buy or rent, whether that just be, as we understand, affordable homes or social housing. But I certainly cannot support the volume that's being proposed in this document. I'm disappointed, very disappointed, that this council is proposing that the lion's share of the district's new housing proposals, as described in this document, is going to be developed in the Felixstowe area, in the Felixstowe Peninsula. This would amount to a further 2,000 homes in addition to the 1,790 new homes already planned for the area in the original local plan. I find it absolutely perverse that, having refused the awful Canglet Road development of some 560 new homes on very sound planning grounds, and subsequently robustly defended that decision at the public inquiry, which was controversially lost, yet here we are, being asked to approve the development of the Garden neighbourhood in the same vicinity north of Felixstowe, which will not only encompass the Canglet Road site, but will deliver nearly three times the volume of housing together with leisure and employment opportunities. This volume of development would, in my opinion, require a sizable inward migration into the area. Where will these new residents find employment? It can no longer be assumed that the increased growth at the Port of Felixstowe will result in the commensurate increase in employment opportunities. Automated systems being introduced across the port enable it to remain competitive, but it also means less jobs. Where will their children go to school? I understand that there will be an increase in primary school provision. That will be catered for, but I've heard from a reliable source that the secondary school provision is simply just not enough. Doctors and dental surgeries are already under considerable pressure to meet the needs of the existing community. It will mean the loss of beautiful countryside, enjoyed by many for recreational pursuits, the loss of important natural habitats, valuable agricultural land, and given the uncertainty hanging over our future at the moment, that could become incredibly important. The strain on the local roads, already under considerable stress, and the local infrastructure will be immense. I have a mantra, based on a decision adopted by the local development task group many years ago at the Orwell Hotel in Felixstowe, which said something like that each community in the district would be allowed to develop to meet its own organic growth. That any development should, wherever possible, use brownfield sites and should avoid the use of good quality agricultural land. I firmly believe that the volume of development we are now faced with should be spread across all of the areas of the district, adhering to that sentiment. There are many villages across our district that would benefit from additional housing, helping them to become sustainable and indeed preserving village life. The provision of affordable rural housing would mean that younger people would not have to move away from their villages to find accommodation. Indeed, in a report from the East Anglian Daily Times, dated 21st of November 2018, they quoted the Country Land and Business Association claiming that 53 villages in Suffolk Coastal were in danger of becoming fossilised, and the provision of such housing, together with other remedies, would go a long way to stem that trend. The new leisure centre. Obviously, the provision of a state-of-the-art leisure centre would be welcomed by any community, and yes, the existing facilities in Felixstowe are tired. However, I don't believe that the suggested site for the proposed new centre is the correct one. Contrary to statements in the revised local plan, it would not be easily accessible to many of the town's residents, and it would again mean the loss of valuable agricultural land. Although out of my patch, I would like to comment on Innocents Lane. The importance of the Port of Felixstowe to the whole of the area should never be underestimated. It's a very important economic driver. All efforts should be made.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor.
Can I just wind this up? Because
Yes,
it is
please.
quite important. all efforts should be made by local authorities to help maintain its leading edge in what is always a very challenging commercial environment. That said, it should not be at the expense of local communities, and frankly, I cannot think of a more unsuitable site for the provision of a logistics park to support the port. The proposal has been met with very hostile reception by the villages of Curtin, Trim and St Martin, and I am not convinced of its actual need. However, if such a provision is required, there must be more suitable sites. There are already plans in existence for a very large complex to be built along the Port of Felixstowe Road. This scheme, approved some 4 years ago, has not materialised. At much the same time, the Dock Company unveiled plans to build similar facilities on the dock estate. Yeah, okay, I am. And as far as I'm aware, still nothing has happened. Surely such a provision of such importance as one of these sites would be operational by now. It does seem to me that in offering this site, the landowner has done very little or doesn't care of the impact it will have on the local environment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll try and shorten what I was going to say. The starting point, I think, of this process should have been a detailed analysis of whether this document, the old plan, had delivered on the promises and the fine words which are in here. And I think that is a matter for regret. We should not create new policies until we assessed how the old policies have worked. My experience of working on the planning committee for 4 years, for me the critical issue was the monthly meetings when local towns and parishes tried to persuade us that houses they wanted were not needed, were in the wrong place and were damaging their communities. When I left the council for a gap year, the local press documented what seemed to me to be the continuing war between district councils across Suffolk and their communities. The conflict seemed to take place East Berghill, Long Melford, Yoxford, Wenniston, Framlingham, Easton. You go on and on and on. Every single month in the local paper there was conflict. These communities not only had to fight their own councillors, but the whole machinery of the state seemed to be aligned against them. Even if they won the initial skirmish, that puppet organisation called the Planning Inspectorate were there to put them to the sword. The housing targets, which had in fact been set by Whitehall, were top-down calculations handed down by diktat from central government and were too demanding. They remain too demanding. And I think as Councillor Fry started his contribution, the government requires us. This is, we should have our MPs here because this is government policy which is driving it. It's not driven by local councillors, and I think we should be making representations to government that we want more devolution of authority to the people here tonight. The figures are too high. Given the natural population is generally in decline, the declining population is not unusual. We have it all over Europe. In Suffolk there were 7,000 deaths, 6,000 births. There's in fact very little pressure to build houses from our own electors. But what is happening is the vast majority of the new houses that have been built are destined to be lived in by people who have little or no connection with Suffolk. What we're seeing is a massive inward migration of people into this part of the country. In the southern part of the district, people are moving here and commuting to London. They may be living in Suffolk, but the companies they work for and generate their profit are in another area. In the north of the county, most of this inward migration is older people. Now the demographics don't lie. In 10 years' time, over a third of the population of the district will be over the age of 65. This population is a direct result of our planning policies. We're building thousands of expensive executive-style houses in Suffolk and our regional towns, and these houses are being avidly snapped up by the well-heeled, boosted by rising asset and housing prices, stimulated by the government's policy of quantitative easing. I know some councillors believe that the ageing population in Suffolk is a result of clean living and healthy sea air. That is complete nonsense. It's as a result of inward migration. The other flaw, I think, in our thinking here is that this policy will benefit our local economy. What it actually says, one of the key words here, is Suffolk Coastal has one of the oldest populations of any district in the country. If you think it's bad now, it's going to get a lot worse. Alarm bells should be ringing. Policy makers across the world are grappling the question of how to sustain economic growth when the dependency ratios are moving against you, and where the number of working age population declining and the economically inactive increase. With such an unbalanced demographic, I'm afraid to say our local economy in East Suffolk is going to suffer. Having an unbalanced population is clearly detrimental to our prosperity, but it creates its own economic bubble.
Councillor Gall, can you wind up that, please?
Right, I've just come to my conclusion. So that the beneficiaries of this plan, people who currently don't live in Suffolk, the London boroughs who want to duck out of their responsibilities to their older citizens, the house builders and their shareholders. And the risks in the plan are clear. We are building far more houses than our communities need. We will damage our countryside. The houses we build will be of low sustainability and poor design, unworthy to be placed alongside the 2,700 listed buildings around Suffolk. The plan tells us that we're going to be one of the oldest populations in the country. Now, if you were asked tonight to vote on whether you wanted to have the oldest population in the country in Suffolk District Council, you'd say no. But that's exactly where we're going. Given our demography, any hopes of infrastructure investment in national government are a pipe dream. They're not going to invest in an area of the country where there's low economic growth. I'm sorry, I won't be voting for the plan. We need to produce new figures based on what local people need and attempt to explain to people why Suffolk, the oldest county, is not a good idea.
Can I just remind everybody
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I had a number of things I planned to say, but I have to make one or two remarks first about what I will call the very strange contributions from the last two speakers, certainly from Councillor Gower and Councillor Hudson. Councillor Hudson is well known for flights of fancy, but he mentioned in one breath 10,000 houses and doubling the population of Felixstowe. Let's be very clear to start with. This plan is about an additional 3,478 houses across the district, of which an additional 1,400, not an additional 2,000, are in Felixstowe. So let's just keep our feet somewhere near the ground. Okay. Councillor Gower made so many points. Councillor Gower made so many points in the second part of his speech, which discounted his argument. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The older population is a problem. I'm 73. My dad died at 72. Mum not much after. We're not going to, our generation. We are sitting in houses that our parents had vacated, frankly. The life expectancy of a girl entering primary school now is said to be 101. So the population is increasing because we are more healthy and we're longer living. And in theory, that's a good thing. So let's get those things out of the way. I have thought long and hard, as many people know, I think this is actually the fifth, would you believe, plan for this district that I have been concerned with, starting with the Felixstowe Peninsula plan in 88 or something. And I have a very clear vision for Felixstowe, but the principles apply elsewhere in different ways, that any community to thrive must grow. Think of the engineering towns of the 1850s to the 1950s, and what are they like now? Think of the big fishing ports. Any any community that depends, that is not growing, is going to decline, and that is not what we want. In terms of the Felixstowe plan, we have thought very long and hard about it. I have thought very long and hard about it as part of the working group here, and we in Felixstowe Town Council thought about it and came to a majority view. And in terms of Felixstowe, Felixstowe has always been a growing town. Most people in this room, well, not most people, most councillors in this room probably live in market towns or villages, which are only slightly larger than they were perhaps 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago. Go back to 1890, Felixstowe was just a few hundred houses, and some visionary people bought land, sat down and designed a wonderful place to live, and they started building. And from then until 2000, the population grew, the number of dwellings grew from the few hundreds, I don't know what that number is exactly, to 12,500. 1890 to 2000. That's 1,000 a year. And the town we know and love, including residents of Cliss Estate, including residents of Links Avenue, including residents where I live, built in the 20s, we are all living in homes that were built on fields in relative terms relatively recently. What would Felixstowe be like with no Cavendish Park built in the 80s and 90s? What would it be like with no Cliff Estate built in the 70s and 80s? What would it be like with no Coleridge Road and Links Avenue built in the post-war period? What would it be like that the beautiful area I'm privileged to live in, Brook Lane, Fox Road Lane? My house was the first, that was their boarding in Felixstowe. War, my house, and the rest of it. It was an intrusion in those days. Felixstowe has thrived on growth. The same goes for our industry generally. Our resort is thriving like no other. And our port. When I say the port, to clarify the concept of Secretary Councillor Deacon, the port's got automatic cranes. It doesn't need employees. When we talk about the port of Felixstowe, the Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company and its employees are a small but clearly crucial part of the whole. The port, when we, in these terms, is all of the logistics, the haulage, the whole supply chain, which is worth many, many hundreds of millions of pounds a year. So what we must do is make sure that we, Felixstowe support, in fact, and in other parts of the district, support economic growth, because it is only when you have economic growth in your community, be that community UK PLC, be it Suffolk Coastal, be it Felixstowe, be it Sax London, you need growth to thrive. And many correspondents have written to me in what they call the best interest of Felixstowe. I will say here and now, and with conviction, I have worked for 30 years in the best interest of Felixstowe, which you might believe have to be served by growth and by providing homes for our younger people, which can only happen. And master plans, if I can just conclude, we have 3, Sax London, Felixstowe and the Innocents Farm. The concept is to put something on paper now, which is not detailed by intent. All of these are subject to further discussion, hence my question to Mr. Whitty about spine roads. There's lots of detail, some things one is more happy with than others, but I shall support the plan and hope we can move forward and upward to a more thriving, prosperous, living community with younger people.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any further people wish to speak? Any councillors?
I would like to call for a recorded vote at this stage. Can I just say, in answer to Councillor Smith, I was employed by the Port of Felixstowe for 25 years of my working life. It was a very happy experience. I want to see it succeed. But I can tell you now, what I said is absolutely true. So, and I happen to know probably far more about it than you do. Thank you.
Will be a recorded vote, as you already said, Madam Chair. But are members clear about the 2 previous amendments, the one that was based on what Councillor Blundell said and the one that Councillor Bond said? Or do you wish me to repeat that amendment for you? Are you all content that you understand what you're voting for? Right, okay. In that case, Councillor Fry, if you put it forward, you propose the motion, and Councillor Holbrook has seconded it. In which case I will now, if everybody's happy, go forward to the recorded vote. Yes. Yeah? No, I'm going to read it out, Jem, and then Councillor Bean is going to read it. How they're going through. All right. He's been promoted. Are we ready? Oh yes, absolutely. So Councillor Amos is sadly absent, so the first councillor on my list Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Block. Councillor Bloomfield.
Against.
Councillor Blundell.
For.
Councillor Bond.
Abstain.
Councillor Burrows.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Deacon.
Against.
Councillor Dunk.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Friat.
For.
Councillor Gallant.
For.
Councillor Geeta. Councillor Gower.
Against.
Councillor Green. Councillor Harding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Howard Cobb. Councillor Hedgewood.
For.
Councillor Holcroft.
For.
Councillor Hudson.
Against.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Kelso.
Against.
Councillor Kerry.
Against.
Councillor Lawson. Councillor Lynch.
For.
Councillor Muller. Councillor Mulcahy.
For.
Councillor Newton.
For.
Councillor Savage.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Yoke. Thank you very much, members. Give us a little bit of time. We've got a 5-day thing. Would I like to announce the result of the vote? Thank you very much.
I now have the results of the vote. For is 23, against 8, abstentions 2. And that's a total of 33 councillors.
So motion's carried.
So the motion is now carried.
After which,